It's Friday the 6th, and this is Morning Mike and Bike. I just finished listening to This American Life episode about thieves or stealing. I can't remember what the title of it was. It's kind of interesting listening about to a story, an interview with an elderly woman. They had an interview with an elderly woman who got caught shoplifting, and it turns out she really likes shoplifting. She wasn't being apologetic for it, and she's actually been a shoplifter for most of her life. Just hasn't been caught. And she was talking about how she started shoplifting as a little girl and kept doing it even periodically when she raised her kids, although at a much lower frequency. And that she gets much more enjoyment out of it as a retiree than anything else. How boring bridges and all this stuff. They also had an interview with I think Molly Shannon, who was an actress, a comedian. She'd been on, I think, Saturday Night Live for a while. And she was talking about how she had actually gotten into embezzlement at a hotel she worked at in Los Angeles in the early 80s. It's interesting. These kinds of stories are people you wouldn't expect doing crime, right? The elderly old grandma stealing, or the well-dressed white woman selling drink tickets at a hotel at events in California. You know, he's not your typical stereotypical crime people who are doing stick-ups and stuff. And it makes one think about, crime and who are criminals. Is crime merely a function of need and of need and opportunity, or is it a moral thing? Maybe morality isn't really a part of it. There could be some moral aspect, but I think opportunity has a big part of it. And you can have culture too, and who your friends are, what you get involved with. There was I remember an episode of The Fifth Estate, the Canadian news program I watch sometimes, where they followed some young kids in Toronto some young male teens who were fascinated by gangs and gang violence, and certainly they were poor type kids, not from well-to-do middle-class families, but on the other hand, they weren't starving by any stretch, but it was clear they were fascinated by gang culture. They thought this was exciting, something they wanted to be a part of. So, just even like the elderly grandma who was shoplifting, she was saying there's a thrill, it's exciting, it's fun. So there's an aspect of that comes into crime. And even Molly Shannon was saying how she got a thrill out of stealing, and that was perhaps the biggest reason she did it. and that a lot of her money she was putting into the giving away his church donations, which made it feel really good too. So I suppose the motivations for crime isn't always just to enrich oneself. And you look at a lot of criminals, and it's often quite surprising how little money they have, even the successful ones, because they spend it so quickly or give it away. So I think that in a lot of cases it would be incorrect to say that crime occurs or theft occurs because someone is in dire need. We're not talking about a Jean Valjean who steals a loaf of bread because he's starved to death. Although that may happen on some occasions, it doesn't seem to be the case in a lot of modern society. Which leads me to the other thing, is that a lot of crime, I think, is a function of opportunity. And frankly, I think a lot of people would commit criminal acts, particularly theft, if they thought they could get away with it, and if the opportunity was put right in their lap. You know, if you see somebody drop $100 bill on the ground and you don't think anybody's going to see you pick it up, how many people would give it back to them? How many people would just keep it for themselves? Some would definitely keep it. In those cases, we're not talking about premeditated crime, but if the opportunity presented itself, there's certainly a not insignificant percentage of the population that would do it. You know, I don't know what I would do in all cases. With the money on the ground, I think that's one that's pretty clear to me. I'd try to return it. But there could be murkier kind of situations in my mind, I suppose, where it might be harder for me. I don't know what I would do. It would depend what it was and who it was from. I can certainly kind of think of situations where it would be harder for me to just, I couldn't just tell you right now off the top of my head that I absolutely wouldn't take something that I thought no one would miss. It wasn't any one person's thing. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm sure that many thieves have sophisticated justifications for what they do, that robbing this store or bank isn't really hurting a person, it's a company, or that the person is insured, and therefore that person themselves isn't really going to suffer. It's the evil insurance company, and these insurance companies they just rip people off anyway, so you're just kind of righting the wrong. And these businesses are all thieves, so what's wrong with you thieving from them? I'm sure there's lots of justifications a person can come up with for these types of things. I do agree with some of the sentiments that I've heard of people who think that embezzlers are really just as bad as a mugger or someone who holds up a bank. Yep. If you're embezzling, you're stealing. I remember in the early 90s, there was a woman who got caught for embezzlement at Amdahl Corporation when I worked there. She was just a clerk handling petty cash for expenses. There was like a cash window you could go to with receipts if you had to buy things. And she would disperse cash, and somehow she was taking money for herself. And somebody discovered funky stuff going on with the books, and she got caught. And I remember that I had actually went and she was a single mom, and I was helping with computer support for the finance group at Amdahl, and she'd hired me to come to her house or to her apartment and help her with her home computer at the time. And she had a little kid. Yeah, she wasn't living super extravagantly, and I don't know how much she embezzled. I don't know what the consequences were. I don't even know if she had jail time. I have no idea. That's small fry compared to the big thieves who embezzle millions or tens of millions or more from their companies. There's a whole category, though, of white collar crime that includes embezzlement that I'm not sure that I put in all of these different gradations of behavior in the same thing, the same category of criminality and moral condemnation. Things like insider trading just doesn't bother me as much as many of these other things. I mean, it's one thing to take money from a client's account. It's another thing to make your own trades based on what you see your clients doing. Hello. As to be honest, I've never really supported the insider trading laws anyway. So if I don't really think those laws make sense, it's hard for me to then view the people who do insider trading as committing as criminals. And you have cases of corporate officers who lie about the financial state of their company or material facts in order to enrich themselves and keep the stock price high or something. At a high level, I would say that lying about the books of your company or the financial state it would constitute fraud. If you know that their true state is otherwise, and then you tell people something else, make it look better, then that is a crime. And fraud really is theft. You trick people into giving you money through lies or deceit. That's theft, just the same as if you used a gun and told them to give you the contents of their wallets. So I have absolutely no sympathy for fraud. I remember there was another story on This American Life, in an episode I've listened to quite a while ago, about a young man who was responsible for the gift shop at a famous museum, apparently. They never said the name of the museum. And he had a big challenge with wastage. There was a lot of, when they tallied their books, there was a lot of money missing, and it was 20-30%, and it was huge amount of money that was never accounted for on a regular basis. And so he figured somebody must be stealing, and one of the insiders, one of the employees, and he hired a private investigator to help him find the culprit, and they identified a suspect. They did some kind of a sting operation with marked currency or something, and they caught him. They caught the guy stealing, and I can't remember if he confessed, but they definitely, absolutely had caught this guy and had proven that he'd been stealing from the gift store. However, when they dug into it more, they realized that his thefts never could have constituted the amount of theft that was going on. It would have been a small portion of the overall losses that they, and missing money that they had. And they never worried. They tried to find other thieves and identify who was doing it, to no avail. And eventually, this manager of the shop instituted tough inventory policies, and where everything was accounted for all the time, with record keeping, which was standard at most retail places, and just had never really been used at this museum that wasn't really in the business of, they weren't business people or retailers traditionally. And so he instituted some of these standard industry practices for retailing, for inventory and cash management, and all of a sudden the waste disappeared, and they were at industry norms for the amount of lost cash that they had. They never did catch anyone else, but the implication was there were a lot of people stealing. And this makes you wonder, if it's easy, if you can get away, if the opportunity is there, and it's easy to get away with stealing, a lot of people would obviously do it. And in this museum, there was clearly a culture of pilfering. A lot of upstanding citizens who were volunteers, docents, and so on, obviously in their own minds felt that there was nothing wrong with them taking some goods from the store, from the shelves in the store. Hey, I volunteer to work here for free at the museum. So it's really, I'm not hurting anybody just by taking this print of art from the museum store and taking this home and giving it as a gift to my grandchild. I'm sure that kind of thing went on. So what lurks in the hearts of men, right? Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Mike and Bike, and I will see you all next time.